You know, for decades, there's been this simple story we've all heard about how countries get rich. It basically goes like this: grow stuff, dig stuff up, and sell it to the rest of the world. The more you export, the more money you make, the faster you grow. Seems like a no-brainer, right? But what if that whole story is wrong?
So let's just get right to it. We're going to poke at this big fundamental assumption, and we're going to do it by looking at one of the most important sectors for any developing country, agriculture. Does just selling more raw stuff from the farm really lead to prosperity?
Okay, so this idea we're digging into, it isn't some fringe theory. It's a foundational pillar of classic economics. And the logic seems totally solid, right? You export goods, you bring in cash from other countries. Then you can take that cash and buy the cool stuff, the advanced technology, the heavy machinery that lets you build up your own industries and grow for the long haul.
And what's wild is just how much this one idea has run the show. It has a name. It's called the export-led growth hypothesis. And let me tell you, it has been the playbook for developing nations and huge institutions like the World Bank for generations. It's been treated like a golden rule, something you just don't question. But you know us, we love to question the golden rules. Does it always work? Well, that's the exact question a 2017 master's thesis decided to tackle head-on. And they put the theory to the test in one of the most dynamic and agriculturally important hotspots on the planet: Southeast Asia.
All right, so here's the lowdown on the study. The researchers grabbed data from 8 developing ASEAN countries, and they looked at a big chunk of time, a full 20 years. They were looking at all the usual suspects: economic growth, jobs, investment, but they were zeroed in on one very specific question: what kind of export is actually doing the heavy lifting?
And folks, this is where things get really, really interesting. Because when they dug into the data and started running the numbers, what they found was, well, it was a total shocker. It's something that basically flips that old theory upside down and leaves us with this incredible puzzle.
Okay, so the secret sauce here is realizing that not all exports are the same. This is the key. The study split them into 2 buckets. In one bucket, you've got your raw agricultural stuff, like rice straight from the field or coffee beans before they're roasted. You get the picture. And in the other bucket, manufactured goods, your electronics, your clothes, your nicely packaged foods. And believe me, that difference, it's everything. All right, get ready for this, because this is the first bombshell. The study found that for every 1% increase in shipping out those raw farm goods, GDP growth actually went down by 0.356%. Yeah, you heard that right. Let me say it again. Selling more raw stuff was linked to the economy getting smaller. How is that even possible? But then they looked at the other bucket, the manufactured goods. And here, a totally different story. A 1% increase in those exports led to a positive bump in GDP growth. It's a small number, 0.0113%. But hey, it's positive. So you've got this wild situation where one kind of export is hurting and the other is helping, just like the old theory said it should.
So this leads us to the big, flashing, million-dollar question: why? It makes no sense on the surface, does it? How can selling more stuff to the world be bad for your own country? Well, the answer, it turns out, has nothing to do with the shipping part. It's all about what happens before it even gets to the port. And the key that unlocks this whole puzzle is a really powerful economic idea called value-added processing. Basically, it's the concept that the real money, the real engine for growth, isn't in the raw material itself. It's in all the smart stuff you do to it afterwards to transform it and make it more valuable.
To put it simply, this is where the magic happens. It's the difference between selling a bag of raw green coffee beans for a couple of bucks and selling a fancy bag of perfectly roasted, ground, and beautifully packaged coffee for like 10 times the price. All that roasting, grinding, and packaging, that's what creates jobs, that's what requires new tech, and most importantly, that's what keeps the real profits at home.
The thesis gives a perfect example using rice. Check this out. Step 1. You can just export the raw patty right off the stalk. That's the lowest value. Or, step 2, you could build a mill and turn it into milled rice before you sell it. That's better, you get a higher price. But the best option? Step 3. You build factories that make something like parboiled rice. That's a premium product that sells for way more. Every step you take up that value ladder is more money and more jobs staying right there at home.
Here's an easy way to think about it. Imagine a pizzeria. Exporting raw materials is like just selling the flour, the tomatoes, and the cheese. Sure, you make a little money. But exporting finished goods, that's like selling the whole, hot, delicious pizza. Where's the real profit? It's in the pizza, not the ingredients. And what this study shows is that too many countries are stuck just selling the ingredients, while other places are getting rich selling the final meal.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the fix? Well, the cool thing about this research is it doesn't just point out what's wrong, it actually gives a clear roadmap for a solution. And the big message is, stop trying to work harder and start working smarter. It's not about growing more, it's about creating more value from what you already have.
And the policy recommendations are super direct and practical. First, governments need to make a conscious choice to rely less on just shipping out raw stuff. Instead, they need to attract investment for processing factories right there at home. They need to help modernize those facilities so they can compete globally. The whole game has to shift from being a supplier of ingredients to being a creator of high-value, finished goods.
So when you boil it all down, the big takeaway is that old story we started with, it was just too simple. The real path to prosperity isn't paved by how much stuff you can ship out the door. It's all about the quality and the value of that stuff. It's not about exporting more, it's about exporting smarter.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on, doesn't it? If this long-held golden rule about exports turned out to be way more complicated than it looked, what other fundamental economic ideas that we just take for granted might be worth a second look? It's a great reminder to always question the conventional wisdom,